Welcome to a new episode of the Accidental Landlord Podcast. I am your host, Peter McKenzie. Today's episode is going to be short, sweet, but very relative if you have relevant if you have a property in our area. So this is our quarterly market update. Obviously, this is not the sales market, this is the rental market. So we didn't get right to the second quarter market update right on time. So this is a lot of this data is going to be from the second quarter, and a couple of these data points are going to be from today, which is obviously into the third quarter. But let's get into it. So first thing we'd like to address are the total available rentals in Ventura County. So last quarter, there were roughly 629, or the first quarter, I should say, 629 available rental properties in Ventura County. Today, this is real world data, there's roughly 1,794 properties available in Ventura County. And then we further break it down to the city of Ventura. Last quarter, there was 133. This quarter, or today, 460. So this is a shocking piece of information. This is a drastic change to the rental market. And this is worth pausing for a second and talking about. So it's 2-3x the number of rental properties available in our market. That's way more than we normally see. That's not just your typical, it's summertime and there's more properties on the market. This is a drastic increase. Now, exactly the reasons why that's happening, it could be tied to interest rates or things going on in the sales market. And I'm not here to predict exactly why it's happened. What I'm here to do is say we had a pretty drastic change. And as a result of that, we need to adjust things, and landlords need to adjust things that they do, because when you have a giant increase in supply, it's going to affect how long it takes to rent the properties. It's going to affect how much the properties rent for. The whole law of supply and demands applies here, but we can get to some of the solutions a little bit later. The other thing that we comment on at each of these quarterly updates is the median rent price for a single family home in Ventura, specifically a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house. So last quarter, the median was $3,850. This quarter two, this is not real-time data, this is the end of quarter two, $3,950. So it went up about $100. Now you will notice that some of this quarter two data is going to paint a rosier picture than what's actually going on in today's time period. So we had this drastic increase in the number of properties on the market. It's going to take a little while for some of the effects of that to trickle down. So this data is the quarter two data, which we will get into. Okay. Next piece of information we like to talk about is how many of these 3-bedroom houses in the city of Ventura are available. First quarter, there was 32. The second quarter, there was 34. So basically stayed the same. The third quarter is when we're going to see a drastic jump. And then how about days on market? How long is it taking these properties to rent? Previous quarter was taking roughly 38 days. The second quarter was taking 27 days. So that's obviously an improvement, which is good news for landlords. Vacancy rates stayed roughly the same across the state of California. It's sometimes it's difficult to find specific vacancy information for counties or cities in a county. We have the vacancy rate for the portfolio that we manage, but that's not necessarily indicative of the entire city or the entire county. The other thing we like to talk about is the consumer price index. This obviously is for people whose properties are controlled by statewide rent control, whether Assembly Bill 1482 or Senate Bill 567. Last time they reported on this was August 2023. That number was 8.8%. which is the CPI of 3.8 plus 5%. This, in August of 2024, they came out with a new number. It went up 0.1%. So now you can raise the rents 8.9%, whereas previous year it was 8.8%. Roughly, it's around 9%. Obviously, you don't want to exceed that. You don't want to exceed the limits. But in general, this stayed about the same as it was before. The other thing we like to talk about are interest rates. These are 30-year fixed mortgage rates. We're not here to report on every nuance around it, but just in general, I think our last quarter update, they were like between 6.5 and 7. The rates have come down a little bit, and they are roughly 6 to 6.5% on the interest rates. And then the last thing we talk about is how far in advance we're pre-advertising properties. This is a property that we know is coming on the market, but it's not necessarily ready to show, meaning someone can't go, look at it. We were doing that about a week in advance. We're still doing it about a week in advance, 5 to 7 days, according to our leasing staff. And the main reason is because there's such a glut of available properties. Dumping your property on to compete with other properties in that format, we find is not the best move. Now, when things are different, when properties are renting quickly and there's a shortage of supply, that's when we find we can increase the amount of time that we pre-advertise them for. Now, that was a lot of information. It definitely paints a picture. Oh, one last piece, and this is the data that we track internally. We call it our showings to leases signed. This is when a property is ready to be shown to when we have a signed lease, not necessarily the tenant moved in, but just a signed lease that the property is off the market. It went from 12.12 days last quarter to 14.52. And that actually is a real world, up to today's date or data set. So it's starting to show that because the supply is increasing, the time it takes us to rent the properties is also increasing. Now, which leads us into the next little part of this podcast is, okay, we have now a big boost to our supply. If you're a landlord, what do you do? Now, I also want to zoom out a little bit. I network with a fair amount of people who own management companies all across the country. And this is the general trend, is it's getting harder to rent properties. They're sitting on the market longer and there's more of them. So we are not in some little microcosm bubble that this is the only thing that's happening to us here in Ventura County. This is a trend that the whole nation is seeing. That being said, there are strategies and things that we can do to mitigate this. And this applies to pretty much anywhere where this is happening, which is a lot of the country right now. Here are the principles. You have to be able to take this data and come up with a game plan so that you as a landlord remain competitive. And what do we mean by that? If there's 3 times the properties available for rent in your neighborhood, you're going to have to stand out that much more. You should want to make your house the best house on the block. Because if somebody in your shoes is going, I need to rent a house, I like this neighborhood, there's 4 houses here that I have to look at, do you think they're going to pick the worst one? More than likely, they're going to be attracted to the house that has the most updated fixtures and flooring and paint, curb appeal, all those things that would attract somebody to your house. You have to make sure that they come to you first. So that means if you have an eyesore or something that you know about, hey, the carpet's, run down. It's been through 2 or 3 sets of tenants. Might be time to upgrade the flooring. Or if it's been a couple years since you repainted, might be time to repaint. Or, things on the outside to enhance the curb appeal. You have to make your house stand out because you are now competing with all the other properties that are available. And if your house doesn't stand out, it's going to sit longer, which is going to translate to more lost rent. The other thing that you need to consider doing is aggressively lowering the price. So, same scenario, 4 houses are available in your neighborhood and everybody's at the same price. Whoever lowers the price first and has a desirable property is more than likely going to rent their house first. And we don't want to be stuck to our rent price and keep your house vacant. If you lose a month's worth of rent, which in our area is, we just went over the average, it was $3,950, so $4,000. You don't rent that property for a month because you're stuck on a number, you just lost $4,000. But every day that you don't rent that property is roughly $130. So aggressively lower the rent. Now, we're not talking about lowering it by $500. We're talking about $100 a week, possibly. There gets a point where, you can't go too low. But generally speaking, $100 increments, you will see a jump in the activity. And how do you gauge whether it's working? The number of people that are calling you about the property, the number of times you're showing it, and the number of applications you receive is a good bellwether of the interest and the reaction to the price adjustments that you're making. Okay, the other thing we're seeing that some landlords do are offering rent concessions. Now, when we're in a hot market where there's not enough rental properties, no one offers rent concessions. When we're in a situation where virtually, overnight, we all of a sudden got this huge increase in supply, we're seeing rent concessions. And you see this a lot more in multifamily because, and here's our opinion on why, those operations are run by big corporations who are unemotional, who are literally looking at the numbers on spreadsheets and going, oh, we have a problem. We're not renting fast enough. Lower the prices, start offering move-in specials, those types of things. It's bleeding over into the single family market, which is where we operate. And we are seeing more rent concessions. That can, it's the same thing, entice somebody to apply for your property over someone else who's not offering it. And then the last thing that is a little bit of a controversial strategy is some people will take down their listings, wait a few days, and repost in the hopes that they reset the counter. Oh, it's only been available for 2 days, when in reality, it's been on there for a month. That I've seen work before. There's some people who don't think it works, but that is something you could entertain doing, especially if you're managing one property on your own. You have the ability to tweak these types of things to see if you can drive the outcome that you're hoping to drive, which is to get the property rented out to a really highly qualified tenant. So that is our market update. The wrong way to interpret this information is, well, 2 years ago, I rented my house for $4,500, so I'm just going to stay there because 2 years ago, somebody paid it. Well, 2 years ago was a really different time being a landlord than it is today. 2 years ago, we were still intertwined with COVID and all the wacky supply and demand issues that created. So if you do nothing and you are stuck to the price, you for sure are going to pay the price, which the price that you're going to pay is the property's not going to rent. When the property doesn't rent, you're not collecting anything. And when the property stays vacant long, you're a target for a lot of negative things. Scammers target properties that have been on the market for a long time. People break into vacant properties that they know have been on the market for a long time. The number one goal as a landlord is to get the property rented as fast as possible to the best qualified tenant. So doing nothing and hoping this goes away is not the right way to do this. Because literally, let's just use our example of 4 houses in the neighborhood. All the 3 houses are going to rent before they get to your house. And by that time, you could have easily lost a month or 2 months of rent. So doing nothing is not the right strategy. And then the last thing is, when you have a vacant property, you're most at risk as a landlord. You need to aggressively stay on top of it. And if your property's not renting, make sure you go over to the property, walk through it. Something might come to you like, oh, I didn't realize that this problem was here, or this thing happened since the last time I was here, and this is why people aren't renting my property. That's not that uncommon and has happened before. Or all of a sudden the neighbor is, there's something going on at the neighbor's house that you don't realize because you haven't been there for a few years. That could affect your ability to rent it as well. Hope that makes sense. Short and sweet. Take this information. This is, August of 2024. Definitely seen some changes in the market. Hope you guys are able to make adjustments and get your properties rented out fast. If you're in Ventura County and you want to have a conversation with us on how we're renting our properties quickly for our clients, we're definitely happy to have that conversation with you. If you know a landlord in Ventura County, please share this with them. This is information that if you're a landlord, you need, because when you're not doing this at scale and you don't have hundreds of properties that you manage, sometimes it's hard to see these trends if you're just focused on 1 or 2 properties. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate the time you took to listen. And yeah, thank you.